Exactly 8 days since the ban on GMO was lifted by the current president. Still a lot of conversations out here in respect to the impact of this genetically modified organisms to our health and ultimately the environment. But just what has been done out there in terms of research, and what exactly is the impact of this kind of foods to our health, to our environment, and why necessarily lift it at this point? This is what you're set to converse in the next 40 minutes or so with my guest who's here to help us understand more about that. That is Daniel Wanjuki, who is the director, EcoSave Africa. Karibu sana to the program, sir.
Asante sana. It's a pleasure being your guest.
Thank you so much. Yeah. 8 days later, quick reactions on that ban.
The ban
on lifting of that ban, so to speak.
The lifting of the ban should not have taken place. And we're coming from a situation where we actually have no reason to do that. There's no evidence that should change our position in 2012. The position that the cabinet took in 2012 was very good. It was a permanent, it should have been a permanent ban, but lifting it on the first day of the new government sitting is very criminal. Actually, there's no way, nobody had an agenda for that meeting.
Are those heavy words you're using?
Yeah, I'm very confident, because I know the president is a scientist, and he's actually, I did botany and zoology like he did. I did environmental science like he did for masters. I will be pursuing my same course. So I know I'm speaking to a person who I can communicate with the same language without even trying to beat about the bush. The ban should not take place because it was not, the lifting of the ban is not based on any scientific evidence that is new, that we can use as evidence for overturning the area ban. The reason for being this so strong on this is because the GMO, the conversation of the GMO is very fluid. Nobody has any hard facts on its efficacy, on its environmental impact, and finally I would say, as an environmentalist, that we should apply what we call the precautionary principle, which says that in the lack of evidence that this is not good or it is not bad, then you just avoid it on that basis only. So the ban should not have been done. And I was trying to say that the first sitting of the cabinet could not have had such a heavy agenda that would be, they had not discussed it the previous week, and that day they were able to lift the ban. So I think it's someone who squeezed that into the agenda, and being the first day, everybody had butterflies sitting on that long table, and the GMO ban was lifted.
Let me pick you on that note, that on the first day of cabinet, of course you know that this is the outgoing cabinet, but then on that first day of sitting, just as you've said, that this was such a heavy matter that need not to have been perhaps decided at such a point. But again, also remember that this comes on the backdrop of the issues of drought that we are facing as a country, the issues of food security. We are currently talking about 23 counties, and this number is increasing. In fact, last week, Governor Dadu talked about how some Kenyans in the northern part of the country would have to wait a little bit longer before then this cash transfers can get to them. And we also know that the state has been really so much in trying to ensure they help those that have really been affected by issues of food security, particularly in the drought-ravaging counties. So this is part of what was being thought about as they were lifting this ban. So then why would you say that it was such a hurried decision, taking cognizant of the effects of drought?
The reason I would say that the GMO has no relationship completely with the situation in Northeastern, and there is no way that GMO is going to turn that story around. The drought in Northeastern is because of a lack of use of resources that would otherwise have been used to ameliorate or make the drought less severe. We have the Tana River still flowing into the Indian Ocean with all the nutrients from the Mount Kenya region. All the fertilizer that we use ends up in the ocean, and it passes through the Northeastern. It passes through Garissa. Why haven't you diverted those rivers into northeastern, it would take Kenya Pipeline Company maybe a year to distribute water in the northern part of Kenya and use irrigation for our food security. We have Garana Kuraru project. Currently, Moribad, it had a lot of hopes. We had a lot of hopes on that. It was growing normal maize. Then you come and tell us that you have a maize variety that would actually survive the drought. If they do that, if they can today go plant maize in Taita Taveta, in Wajir, the GMO maize, and it takes shoot, it grows, gives us a crop, I'll drop my opposition for the ban. But the GMO was meant, the GMO maize, for example, because that's one of the reasons why we are going to that direction, was meant to bridge the gap between years when we had this short rainfalls that was not adequate for our normal crops. So that's such that I come from Laikipia, and the maize requires about 2,200 millimeters of rainfall per year for a crop to grow. It has dropped to 1,600 millimeters per year around 1990, 1995. But in the last few years, it's not about short rainfalls. There's no rain. Rain didn't come in April. Whatever you planted would just rotted. Even if it was GMO maize, it was still rot in the farm.
Due to the absence of
because
rain.
there's no rainfall at all. So we are fixing a problem which the GMO would have fixed the situation when we had maize without enough rainfall. And so the maize would grow, and just before it shoots, the tassels come out, the rainfall would drop. So a GMO maize which would take 90 days instead of 120 days would have been appropriate. Then I would say that already in Kenya we have Katumani maize, which was very good. It did 70 days, and you could eat mutungo on it. The roast maize or the green maize, that is. But nobody's talking about Katumani. Nobody's talking about getting water from our rivers, Nairobi River here, into areas of Makueni where we could grow maize or sorghum or cassava. We're being told to grow GMO maize, whose seed has to be bought, whose insecticides, the one you use, is only one company that will supply, whose seed you cannot give to your neighbor. The remainder of your seeds you can't give to your neighbor because he has to have a contract with the supplier in the US to be allowed to grow that maize. We have a situation in India where a farmer was actually taken to court for giving potato seeds to his neighbor to grow. And so these were controlled seeds. And just by growing that potato, and you are not allowed to do it, you actually find yourself in court. In Africa, we've been borrowing seeds from your neighbor. If you didn't get your crop well, or you could get a better variety from your neighbor. But what is being proposed at a GMO is a complete change. It's very capitalistic, very commercialization of seeds, and it's not going to help us. Like I said, there's nothing we are going to get from the GMO. It is too late to get into the bandwagon for GMO. And the trials that have been done, there's nothing showing that we are going to get better by involving GMO technology in our farming. Yeah.
And I'd like you to elucidate on that issue just a bit further for proper context and understanding. That you've also given a very good example that when you come down to Africa, we are more of a community than living individualistic kind of lives. And yes, you say that we also so much used to giving. I'll be having like potato seeds, I'll be having like maize seeds. It's easy for me to give a neighbor who's the next farmer next door. So when you talked about GMO seeds, you can't give out. Why is that? Why is there a restriction in that aspect?
One is because GMO is like you have forced two organisms to form a union. The moment you plant that maize, the next crop, the plant actually reorganizes itself, and actually the next crop you can't plant that seed. It's called hybrid failure. The first hybrid, it's called a fan. It's good, and when you plant, you can get up to 4 tons of maize in an acre. But if you take that seed and plant it, the crop will be a quarter of what was in the first instance, because of, okay, what I've described as hybrid failure. There is no, they don't agree. Like the organism that is formed after the first crop is completely now a character of what was used to make the first plant, but with very poor characteristics. So the other thing is you must have a contract to grow that seed. The other fact is that you actually you don't require a neighbor near you, because your maize is going to be contaminated. The neighbor's maize will be contaminated by the GMO pollen from the GMO plant. In fact, in countries where they grow, you would have to have about 3 to 5 kilometers buffer zone, so that there's no weed that can blow the pollen to your neighbor. That's what's required. But here in Africa, our plots are on quarter acre. That's like you go to Muranga, if someone is growing a GMO crop in your neighborhood, all the village maize will be changed. That seed will be affected. And it's being affected with a material that is not suitable even for human consumption. Most of these countries where GMO is coming from, they use maize they call it corn, for feeding into animals, feeding. They don't eat directly the maize, but here in Africa, ugali is our staple food. So you're actually taking on that material that you are not even sure you are able to digest. Nobody has checked whether our digestive system is able to digest that GMO.
So you're saying there needed to be more research that needed to have been done before. Okay,
correct.
Beforehand. All right, well said. I mean, the first country in East Africa, 8th in the African continent, joining a list of 30 other countries across the globe who have authorized and put a green flag to GMOs. But then there was a reluctance to lift that ban 10 years back. Fast forward, this has now happened. And I had thought it was because of the issues of drought, because that was also largely what came out in that particular meeting, but you've sort of like ravaged that. So then why the reluctance then and the acceptance now, from your point of standing?
Having been part of the first, the ban.
Yeah.
There's a paper we wrote, and this was describing the possibility, what you are calling the precautionary principle, the fear that what is going to come out of the GMO is not good for us. Besides the commercial aspect, which you have said, the seeds will be sold every other year, the pesticides will be sold by the company. Only that company can sell that. And that some of the chemicals they are proposing...
And this company is not domiciled in Kenya?
Some of them may be, like we have one of the companies which was called Monsanto, was bought by a company which is here in Kenya. I think they're in Ruaraka. Internationally, it was bought. So it means that if you want those seeds here in Kenya, we will get just from somewhere in Nairobi. I'm avoiding mentioning their names. But when you come to the supply of those seeds, there is a very high likelihood that our farmers will not have any possibility of being independent.
I hear you. Yeah. And that's a good place to want to pick this conversation next time, because we need to now cross over to Westlands. That is the exchange building where our president is there. But I just want you to hang on there, because we'll pick it up at that point. There's still a lot to converse on the issue and the aspect of GMO. But that is a good place to end this conversation ultimately. I now want us to cross over to the exchange building, that is 55 Westlands Road, where our very own president is gracing that particular event. That is the bell ringing ceremony, launching of the enhanced NSC marketplace. So let's just cross over there, take a listen.